Shalom from Jerusalem. This is Israel at War, day 88, and this is our almost daily update at TV7 News Israel. I'm Amir Oren, sitting in for Jonathan Hessen, and we have two distinguished guests today. Professor Uri Rosenthal, formerly the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Kingdom of Netherlands, and a well-known professor. Uri, welcome.
Good to see you.
And Eran Etzion, formerly a senior official with both the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the National Security Staff. Welcome,
Hi.
Eran.
Hi, good to be here.
So the war seems to be transitioning into a new phase. Israel has unilaterally announced the thinning out of some of its forces in Gaza, even though fighting also goes on along the Lebanese border, exchanges of blows from the air or by missiles and anti-tank weapons, and Israel has also struck a target in Syria. Now, recently, after the New Year's celebration, when Hamas launched rockets into the metropolitan Tel Aviv area, the same organization, Hamas, released a short video, which we will see. Please. So one thing that struck me in watching this clip, obviously a propaganda clip, but nevertheless some interesting stuff there. If one freezes the frame where you can see Hebrew letters on one of the missiles, the legend there is "Let Tel Aviv burn, Al-Quds, Jerusalem, will be liberated." So let's not fight with the liberation of Al-Quds, but let Tel Aviv burn. That means that they are targeting a civilian population center. This is not even an effort to mask their intention. Professor Rosenthal, is that an argument that Israel can use?
I would think so. Let me say very clearly that it is amazing, actually, up till now, throughout the last years, that the barrage of rockets from Gaza as well as from Lebanon have never been assessed in these terms. The fact that both Hamas and Hezbollah are actually also targeting purely civilian, and in this case, Tel Aviv urban centers, has not been a, let me say, definite argument on the part of the Western countries to support Israel. And that is also the case right now. You are really marking a point here. And at the same time, as we all know, the big question continuously on the in Western countries, both in the United States today as well as Europe, is about the way in which Israel, in its high intensity phase of the war, is bombarding several targets in the Gaza Strip, where we all know that the human shield problem is there and will continue to be there.
Thank you. Mr. Etzion, South Africa, of all countries, for some reason, has lodged a complaint with the International Court of Justice, and it specifically cites the Genocide Convention. Now, when one simply reads the text of the convention, it speaks of the intent to eradicate or eliminate a certain group of people based on their ethnicity or origin. And obviously, Israel never had such an intention. The results of its campaign notwithstanding. So, what do you think? How should the Israeli government act when it sees such a complaint? It seems as if Israel has decided to cooperate with this proceeding. And you, in your formal capacity, were involved some 14 years ago when another South African, a jurist, Richard Goldstone, headed a commission appointed to look into what happened after one of Israel's earlier campaigns in Gaza. So the inclination may be to ignore it, let them play without us, but there are also benefits in cooperating with such an inquiry, aren't there?
Yeah, let me first bundle your two questions and say a few words about the first question regarding Hamas and the legitimacy or illegitimacy of its actions and so on, because I think there is a connection here. On the one hand, Israel obviously is fighting Hamas with, at the beginning, a tremendous amount of international legitimacy, certainly from the Western Hemisphere, shall we put it this way, the Americans, the Europeans, and so on. The Russians are obviously a different story, and there is, unfortunately, a significant number of countries around the world who are either supporting Hamas or at least not disavowing its actions. But as far as the countries of interest, let's put it this way, certainly our allies, partners, and so on are concerned, there was and is no question with respect to the illegitimacy of Hamas's actions, and Hamas is an organization. We know it's on the terror list of both the Americans, the Europeans, and so on. So that's kind of the easier part. The more difficult part has to do with your latter question and the damages that Israel is causing unintentionally to very large numbers of uninvolved citizens or inhabitants of Gaza. And that is a real problem. Again, irrespective of the ICJ and the South African government's obvious motivations, we cannot ignore the fact that there is a problem here that is hurting our legitimacy in the States, in Europe, and elsewhere. And I believe that the government should have heeded the warnings, the repeated warnings of the Americans, first and foremost, but also others, who are trying to impress upon Netanyahu and the cabinet and the IDF leaders that they need to adjust the way they actually operate the IDF forces in Gaza. It happened to a certain extent, but it was probably too late and too little, and the damage was caused. Now, when faced with the ICJ, Israel has a dilemma, which, again, as you mentioned, I was part of the discussions 14 years ago on a similar dilemma of whether or not to cooperate with the Goldstone Investigative Committee. And the decision then was to engage, but on kind of a low level, unofficial, informal, and so on. This time, the government decided, and I think rightfully so, that it will engage formally in order to try and beat the allegations. And I think it's a good move. I believe there are some good arguments, and Israel does have a good case. But again, we cannot ignore reality. There are elements within the Israeli cabinet, within the Israeli public sphere, who have made statements and who hold ideologies that are absolutely within the realm of genocide. We must not hide it, and we cannot hide it because it's out in the open. Those who speak about the transfer of Gazans from Gaza or leveling Gaza and so on and so forth. What was kind of in the deep fringes in the Israeli discourse and certainly in the Israeli polity before October 7th has now unfortunately moved quite aggressively, not to the mainstream, but it is no longer only in the fringes. So there is certainly a problem, and Israel will have to face it not only in the ICJ, but also in its diplomatic relations with all our friends, and that's now and on. I suspect this is now ongoing, kind of daily occupation of my former colleagues in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
We won't go into politics, but if one looks at yesterday's Supreme Court ruling, which kept the integrity of the judiciary intact and resisted the subjugation of the judicial branch to the executive branch, will that give the IDF and more to the point, its officers and men, a shield against individual moves against them?
Well, this is an age-old question, and we have, again, to distinguish very sharply between the Israel of this current Israeli government, pre-January 2023, and the Israel of today. The Israel of pre-January 2023, there was almost no question with respect to the independence of the judiciary, to its legitimacy as a venerable institution, to the resilience of Israel's democracy, and so on. Unfortunately, very quickly, from January 23 until October 23, there was a very significant deterioration in the international perception of the level of resilience of Israel's democracy, and rightfully so, because we underwent a judicial coup attempted by Netanyahu and the government. And we all know the story and the vast popular resistance that erupted and very fortunately for us was able to stop it. And the Supreme Court ruling from yesterday is just the culmination of that process of popular resistance against the judicial coup. Unfortunately, though, it's not over. Yes, we, the Israeli public, 80% of Israelis who stood against this judicial coup have won this battle, and the anti-democratic camp in Israel has gained significant strength. It's not going anywhere. We'll see how long it manages to cling to power. It's an open question. And if and when we do have elections and this camp is not defeated, we will absolutely see very similar attempts at weakening the judicial branch in Israel and the weakening Israeli democracy. It's by no means over. Now, with respect to the connection between all of that and the defense or lack thereof for Israeli soldiers in international courts in The Hague and elsewhere, again, it was almost a non-issue before January 23. It became an issue during 23. Yesterday's ruling, I think, will contribute, let's put it this way, to the positive perception of the resilience of Israel's democracy. But again, we're in a transparent world. Everybody knows everything. And it's not as if, it's not a magic trick that Israel shifted yesterday from a democracy under threat to a democracy free of any kind of internal threats, totally independent judiciary. That is not, unfortunately, the situation, and it will have implications. So bottom line, if I were, an Israeli high officer or an official, and I would be traveling abroad in the coming, months, unfortunately, I cannot assume that I have immunity and that I can travel problem-free.
Thank you. And right now you are free to travel if you have a pressing need. Thank you, Eran Etzion. Professor Rosenthal, what's your view, looking as you are from the Netherlands, the home of the ICJ and the ICC? If there's a one-syllable word which is most threatening to Israeli officers, it's Hague, as we pronounce The Hague. Should we be so concerned, especially after the last 3 months in Gaza?
Well, I would say there would be no need for that, because when Israel is indeed following suit on what has been said by the government, that it will cooperate with the ICC, it simply goes into the purely legal frame of the matter. And there the case on the part of Israel is much stronger than it seems to be in the public opinion and in the eyes and the ears of those who are simply opposing Israel in whatever sense they can. So I would say Israel should not be afraid of that. But allow me to make two comments actually on what is going on here. First, I should be frank, I must be frank and say that I was rather concerned by the statement on the part of, I think, the Prime Minister of Israel, Bibi Netanyahu, who seems to have said that the decision of the Supreme Court in Israel, 827, is deplorable because it would actually damage the unity in the Israeli society as far as the war effort in Gaza is concerned. And
it was probably, Professor Rosenthal, it was probably Justice Minister Levin who made this particular statement, but it's the same direction that you're referring to.
Okay, I'm sorry that I mistook this. I would say that some of the comments I read today in the early morning, in the morning press in the Western countries, was about the question whether Israel would be now up to a constitutional crisis and which would burden the war effort. I would say it is different. The fact that the Supreme Court has decided the way it does is indeed online with what Mr. Etzion said, that Israel shows again and again that it is a genuine democracy. And this only will help the case. Allow me to make one comment on your question about the South African effort to bring the case to the International Criminal Court. Let me say that there is a quite intriguing situation going on the global scale, and that is that South Africa is, of course, a member of the so-called BRICS countries: Brazil, Russia, China, India, and then the S for South Africa. And there we see a very intriguing development going on, where this amalgam of countries are trying to set up a sort of anti-Western front. Also, I would say an anti-Israel front. But there are two buts here. First, that one of the countries of the BRICS, India, is among the countries which is up till now rather supportive of the Israeli case. And secondly, that the effort of this alliance of non-Western countries is actually having a setback, because one of the big countries in South America, namely Argentina, has decided to withdraw from its candidacy for this BRICS alliance. So there are some points in the global scale, in the global dimension of the whole thing, which may be a little bit encouraging to Israel.
But let us draw on your own identity, a triple one, if I may say, of being a former minister, a professor, and a Dutch. And because of your proximity to the honorable, quote-unquote, judges on the International Court, what can you tell us about the practice, not only the formal procedure? What sort of influence does the makeup of the court have, whether the judges are from certain countries, whether there are career personnel there who behind the scenes run the institution? What should Israel expect once this complaint goes through the system?
Well, first, let me say that I would nearly say that I would hope that the procedures of the International Criminal Court will take so much time that at the moment that the verdict will be given, that we will be in a somewhat more quiet phase of the tensions between Israel and the surrounding countries, especially, of course, some countries which are involved in the Gaza war. And for that matter, let me also say that although I understand your question, and I understand that you may be concerned about a certain bias in the International Criminal Court, that having been said, I would say that the focus first and foremost should be and must be on the purely legal international law dimensions of the case. And here the case for Israel is, I would say, stronger than public opinion admits or acknowledges. And here I should also say that, for instance, in my country, in The Hague, in the government seat, there was a very interesting session of the House of Commons, where they were briefed by several international law experts, and where the opinions were quite divided about the question whether Israel was going beyond the limits of the limitations of humanitarian law and the law of armed conflict or not. So don't be too much concerned about the question whether a certain bias in the ICC, as for instance too in the Human Rights Council of the United Nations, would finally, eventually hamper Israel for the full 100%.
But in practical terms, is that like a regular court, where first, if there is a suspicion of a crime, the police collects evidence, then they go to the prosecution, the state attorney, and if he finds merit, he files a case, an indictment, and then it goes to a court. Or is it the case here where they appoint a prosecutor who also does the fact-finding and decides what to do about it?
Well, that is a very incisive question, Amir. And let me say that the general opinion among those lawyers, experts in international law, the general opinion is that you can't accuse any country of anything at all without having done a thorough fact-finding operation. Now, your question is whether there is this separation between police investigations on the one hand and then bringing the case to the public prosecutor. Here you are right that these two phases are more or less brought together in the procedures of the International Criminal Court, as with the International Court of Justice. Nevertheless, I would say that Israel is very right in cooperating with the ICC in this matter, because exactly the point you are raising will be at the heart of the matter in the legal procedures. And here I would also say the ICC on its part has much not only to win but also to lose in this particular case, because if it would transgress and offend the norms and rules of appropriate justice, it would actually make itself much less legitimate than it already is in some respects.
Thank you very much, Professor Rory Rosenthal. Thank you, Ran Etzion. And this has been our update for Israel at War. We will be back Thursday. For the time being, shalom from Jerusalem.
God is light. In Him there is no darkness at all. In a world where darkness is rampant, manifest by injustice, hatred, violence, or war, disinformation fueled by deception serves as a source that perpetuates evil. TV7 Israel strives to serve as a beacon of light, sharing the truth with the nations from Jerusalem. As we enter this season of giving, we humbly ask for your support. Your generous donations play a vital role in ensuring that our content remains free. We look forward to another year when we are able, by the grace of God, to bring to you, our viewers, the light of truth. From all of us here at TV7 Israel News, we wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.